everyone. This is Stan Mallow. Welcome to the Paranormal Yacker. And the guest on today's show who I'll be yakking away with is Wes Roberts. He's a well-respected educator, entrepreneur, writer, college professor. Wes is also an experiencer. And with noted hypnotherapist Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, wrote the book Intersections, a true story of extraterrestrial contact. And I have a copy of it right here. It's really a great book. Later on in the show, we'll tell you how you can order it. Now, without further ado, Wes, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
Thank you.
And you're here. And for those in the Paranormal Yacker audience who don't know it, I met you at the Alien Cosmic Expo. It's a conference sponsored by MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network. Mm-hmm. It was in Toronto some weeks ago. And I had the pleasure of going there, and my original intent, as I told you previously, was to go there as the Paranormal Yacker and get to interview a number of people that were there, because it's pretty much of a who's who in the UFO movement was there. Now, the very first lecture on the first day of the show, that being this Saturday, 8 a.m., it was an experiencer workshop with you and Lesley. Mm-hmm. That had my curiosity, and I'm glad I went to it, but it really upset the cart for me for my interviews, because I was so fascinated with you and with Lesley, what you and the others had to say about it, that I discarded getting interviews with everybody over there, and I just attended all the lectures and demos. And then on the keynote speaker night, we were at the same table there having dinner, and great to speak to you and your associate Anna, who was fascinating also. You are a team, definitely, together with it. And so we've come to this, so I thank you for coming here and for being my guest. Now, I do have a few questions that I did want to ask you, and I'm sure my audience would like to know that too, is, number one, you are an experiencer. That was what your workshop was on.
Yes.
What exactly is an experiencer for those who don't know it?
An experiencer is someone that interacts with alien life forms, pretty much. There might be two categories of a person like me. One would be an abductee, which implies you're being taken against your will. And certainly that's been part of what I went through. But apparently that evolves over time, so that we have some choice in the matter. So at the point in which you have choice, you interact with them more or less consciously if you can, but you have some will, decision-making to move forward. So different species, different kinds of alien life forms indicate their interest in someone, and they're pretty much with you your whole life. And so you sort of got to get used to it. It doesn't go away.
Okay, Wes, do you recall when you had your first close contact experience with non-human beings, and how did you react to it?
So I have to answer that in two ways, to be honest.
Sure.
One way is to say I had a consciously recalled experience in the 1980s, the late 80s, that dogged me. It would not go away. I was living with another woman at the time, my partner then, and she was sort of switched off. We can pursue this later if you want. Disabled, that's say, so that the experience would be mine and she would be unable to interfere with it. Even talk at that point. So I remembered it and I thought, is this a dream? And I analyzed the heck out of it. Dreams have certain qualities and characteristics this lacked, quite honestly. Dreams are so fluidic, as I'm sure you know. They're changing landscapes. We can look at this book, turn our head away and look at it again, and the titles change, the colors change, or it becomes a telephone or something like that. So I analyzed and thought, no dream. Not a lucid dream. Not an out-of-the-body experience, as far as I could tell. Not an illusion or hallucination. So it stuck with me, and I stayed with it for 20 years before I decided to seek an explanation for it. So my reaction to it was to get up in the morning, right after the experience. It was 5 or 6 in the morning. I watched the digital alarm clock and it went through 5 minutes and 5 seconds. This was real time for me. I was not asleep. I was sitting up looking at it. I went to the other room, and on just scrap paper, I recorded the whole experience. And I asked my partner at the time, I said, "Do you remember anything from last night?" And she thought she felt a little bit weird, and then later she was to tell me she was frozen. She couldn't hear, and that is it. And so when I woke up and wrote down the experience, I thought, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I did not associate it with aliens. I did not go, hey, I'm an abductee. This did not happen then. This took 2 decades to happen, more or less.
Okay. At what point did you decide to employ the services of a hypnotherapist, and why did you feel you needed one? And one other question, why Lesley Mitchell-Clarke?
I wrestled with my 1980s experience for 2 decades, more or less. And as it got close to the year 2010, I guess it was 2008, maybe 9, I was irritable. I was not sleeping. I was actually afraid to go to sleep, afraid to close my eyes. And I always felt if I close my eyes, they are going to come get me. I know it sounds paranoid. I was a fairly stable character. I was still a college prof at that time. I had a family life. I was somewhat normal, but this part was out of the ordinary.
Sure.
So it was on the occasion of taking a trip to Portugal, to Porto. That was my first trip to Porto. And I met with a good friend there and a bunch of other friends. But this good friend, I spent the day with her and told her my story. And she said if it was her, she would want to know. She was highly instrumental in getting me to make this decision. I went home, 2009 or so. I sat on it for another year. So maybe 21 years in total. And I started thinking, I am not responding well. I was kind of, at times, pounding my fist on the table saying, these creatures, at that point I was pretty convinced it was something else. These creatures, these aliens, can enter my life when they feel like it. I have no say about it. They can come at night, they can come in the day, they can pluck me away, they can have experiences with me, they can observe me. This is not working for me anymore. And it was beginning to affect my performance, I thought, at college. So one night I was actually scanning the internet, not looking for a hypnotherapist. I was actually looking for healers. And then I started to see listings for hypnotherapists. And I thought, okay, maybe it's time. And so I found one. It wasn't Lesley. I found one and sent her an email. And she said, I don't really deal with these kinds of cases. Kind of with people like you. And that's okay, I didn't take it personally. But she said, my friend, Lesley, has a practice, and she does. And so I contacted Lesley. First we're doing telephone tag, a few emails. And then finally that's come over to her treatment space and she would assess me. And that's the first part of the process, it's an assessment. And one of the things she has to do is determine if I have psychological issues.
Sure.
Or any other medical issues. That might say your experiences don't fall into my world. You need to see a psychologist or psychiatrist. She ran her assessment, including a brief medical assessment, and I was good to go.
Wow, I think that's great. Now I know you had a number of odd experiences related to alien beings, but one specific consciously remembered vision or experience turned your life upside down. What was that experience, and when in your life did it happen?
So there were 2 like that, and I'm actually discovering more because I'm working on my second book, and I'm going through the recorded, not transcripts, the recordings that Lesley makes. So there's digital recordings of all my sessions. So for the first time, after 5 years of sessions, I let them sit on a hard drive. I wouldn't listen to them, and I can't explain why, and I still can't explain why. But for the first time, I'm going through the transcripts, discovering more. The way these things go, Stan, they're staged. It's got to be like theater. It's got to be like movies. They set stages, and you walk onto a stage. And it's like, well, what happens in this stage? So the first stage of this experience was, I'm at the airport. That was stage 1, or phase 1. It's the middle of the night, so how unlikely is that? I seem to be the only one there. I'm watching a couple of planes take off in the darkened sky. Nothing unusual. It seemed like a departure gate at Pearson, actually. So I'm watching planes take off, and I look at one, and boom, there's an explosion. And I thought, horrified, it's the middle of the night, nobody's around. I look to my left and right, and there seemed to be I'm going to have to call it a being beside me. I did not get a look at it. I won't say never, almost never see their faces. And this is apparently a commonality with abductions. They put in place masks. You know, people think, oh, alien, a little gray thing with big black eyes. No, hardly at all for me. So there was a creature beside me. I got a brief look at him. The next moment, it was phase 2, and I was on the plane. I was in the rear washroom of the plane. I could hear the plane. I could hear the turbines. You know, the sort of air, the hissing air that you hear on an airplane, that kind of thing. And I thought, oh. And I was the only one on the plane, it seemed, although I never went out of the washroom. So the plane was in a rapid descent, was going to go down. And my thought, honestly, Stan, and I still feel this when I recount it, is this is when I die. This is it. This is the time. This is the end. So I reached out to Elle, the person I mentioned earlier, and I thought I made mental contact with her, and it seems that I did in the long run. So I reached out to her and basically saw parts of my life flash by and thought, okay, I have a few seconds left. So that was phase 2, then bang, it crashed. I did not feel anything. I was not aware of people screaming, not aware of fire, debris, anything. It was just blank. So I had what could be called an episode of missing time. And Bud Hopkins is really the seminal author, no longer alive, on missing time. But I had a period of missing time, I don't know for how long. I got accustomed to the dark, there was some light, there was a set of double doors ahead of me, and it was obvious I was to walk through the doors. I did. I walked into I always have to call it a pristine apartment, or a condo, like no one had ever lived there. But it was perfect. Nothing out of place. No dust, no clothes thrown around, no nothing. And I got to examine it in this phase of the experience closely. I walked up and down the halls. I saw picture frames. I saw a photo out in it. Nothing changed. I saw, and this is a funny thing, and if we have time for it, I can explain it later. A 1940s era rotary phone on a counter, along with a little black book, literally. And so I saw a version of me in photographs. I saw what appeared to be my family. Wasn't me, wasn't my family as I knew it. I wandered back and forth through the apartment a little bit. At some point I was becoming confused and thinking, I don't know who I am. You know, I don't know if I'm this Wes guy or some other guy that belongs here in this world. At around that time I became aware there was something with me. It was another creature, I call them brown-skinned creatures. It was another creature, and it said, we have to go. Okay? So, the next phase of the experience was, we're walking along what appeared to be an airport tarmac. Empty. No jets, no planes. I was escorted on either side by a creature. I noticed there was a whole long line of us, people, being escorted to what seemed to be a facility, and I thought in my mind it was customs. I thought it was customs. So we get to customs, and I actually go through a little turnstile like you might go through on the subway, and there's this cone. It's about 7 or 8 feet tall, pointed at the bottom, pointed at the top. And I was supposed to go in there. It was an elevator. So another piece of masking, I think, that the aliens did. So I got on it alone. It's just a one-person elevator. Swish, the doors closed. I felt intense heat and intense light from the top and from the bottom, blindingly so. I had to shut my eyes against it. I felt motion. And the last phase was, swish, the doors open. I'm being greeted at the airport by my family. And we walked off toward the parking lot. I know that's lengthy. Sorry, it's so lengthy.
No, I find it fascinating. Hey, Wes, that was 25 years after an incredible experience that you had before you sought the service as a hypnotherapist. My question to you is, why wait so many years during that time?
That's a great question, because quite honestly, the experiences don't stop. I had experiences before then. I have experiences up until a month or two ago, so they don't stop. I couldn't bring myself to admit I might be one of those people.
Okay.
So there is a stigma in my own mind, which is pretty weird, because I've always been interested in UFOs. But there was a stigma in my own mind when it came to that one point. There was something that was a line in the sand for me. And I'd met abductees in the 1990s, because I was briefly in MUFON, Ontario. I had met abductees, and I always felt uncomfortable around them. Especially one in particular who in time ended up taking his own life, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know him well, but the energy coming through him really flipped me out a little bit. And I'm used to the world of the paranormal and the occult world and so on and so on. But the energy coming through him really made me uncomfortable. So it took me almost 2 decades to say, okay, I think I am.
Okay, got it. Thank you for explaining that. Because I know you're an intelligent guy, college professor, etc. All of these things were happening to you, and yet before you sought professional help, so many years passed. Now I understand why. Now, you write in your book that extraterrestrials seem to have no trouble assuming any kind of humanoid role, gender that they wish to. What led you to that conclusion?
So I've had a number of experiences where I've been in conversation, if you will, with a being that I came to call my twin. She showed up in several hypnosis sessions. I was unaware of her. But apparently she's been with me from childhood to now. And before birth, if I really want to go down that road, before birth. So she's always been with me. So when I first saw her, I'd have to say, I knew it was feminine energy, but her in her original form, she is almost shapeless. Almost shapeless, almost genderless. And I've since been in conversation with her, largely through hypnosis, kind of like a channeling thing, where we've had discussions, and they're amused by our concept of gender and gender identity sometimes. They're amused with it. And in fact, I was just going over a transcript yesterday, because I'm working on my second book here, and my twin in particular thought it was curious about some of the interactions I would have with other beings, meaning intimate interactions I might have with a male or a female. She was like, that was funny to her, curious to her. Why do you folks do this? You know,
Really?
they procreate. She has a family. She has a partner that I see as male in energy. And 2 of my friends in far-flung places, one in Australia and one in California, have seen both of them in their living rooms. I rarely see my twin, like visibly.
Mm-hmm.
But these two friends have seen her, and her male counterpart. So they seem to think, depending on the race, and there are a lot of races of aliens, conservatively speaking, 80. That's conservative.
Wow.
And our government and the U.S. government is supposed to be working with about a dozen of them at any one time, which is distressing. But that's a whole other conversation, right? So they, certain species don't really identify as gender.
Okay. Fascinating. Now, my next question, you touched on it before, but we'll elaborate on it. Because my next question was, you write in your wonderful book about being at the airport with a man you don't know, going through an airplane crash. You spoke about that before, but to a follow-up to that, my question is regarding that recollection. Do you think that was from a past life experience? Also, do you fear flying because of that?
So I have a fear of heights, but not of flying.
Okay.
I did have a fear of flying, actually, around that time. I've not thought about it. I did have a fear of flying. I remember going to Vegas with a friend, and it was not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Then a few years later, I got a job as a seminar presenter. And they flew me across the country regularly. I mean, regularly. They'd fly me to the West Coast, and I would fly to a different city to present every day.
Holy heck, wow.
Every day for 2 weeks. And then I'd fly home. And then I'd do the same thing on the East Coast, or in what we used to call the territories. So I totally got over my fear of flying at that point. I looked forward to turbulence at that point. I was so bored with flying, it was making me crazy. So I have a fear of heights, but not of flying.
Okay.
Is it a past life? I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I was curious about that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, though, Stan, to do the kind of regression I've been through, you might have to go backward in time.
Mm-hmm.
If not to a point in my own life, to a past life. And so Lesley also does a hypnosis technique that's called inner life. I'm not sure if a lot of your viewers or yourself have heard of it. Interlife.
I'd like to know about it. I know the Paranormal Yakka audience would like to know about it.
Interlife hypnosis is, in short, you regress to a point beyond zero, beyond this lifetime. You regress to one of your active lifetimes. Let's assume you've had a few. You are then fast-forwarded in that lifetime to a point of death. At that stage, you're in this limbo that is sometimes called the interlife. And the interlife's like planning. It's like, what are you going to do next? You know, what are you going to do next? I wanted the session with Lesley to find out if my twin and other aliens have always been with me. And sure enough, I appeared before what I would say is a council, and I've done that many times. I appeared before a council in the inner life before being born this way. There's an audience of people, I don't remember it well. Amongst the audience were a few aliens. And it was kind of like a tip of the hat. It's like, at some point you'll remember this.
Mm-hmm. Now, it seems alien beings took an interest in you. That's obvious from everything you said and from your book. They even helped you when you were physically ill. Why do you think they took an interest in you, and how did they help you when you were sick?
The why me question comes up a lot. And my best answer, but I'll flesh it out a bit, is that I agreed. I agreed to this. I didn't know I agreed, meaning I didn't remember I agreed till about 10 years ago. Just before I went to see Lesley, or around that time, or through our first few sessions, it became obvious I agreed. In the interlife session itself, they were there. I agreed.
Wow. Now, at the age of 19 or 20, You were contacted by and met with the ET Council. You mentioned about being with the ET Council previous. I wonder what were the dynamics of that council? How many ETs were present? Or what did the ETs look like? What did the council room look like? What was discussed? And why do you think they wanted you there?
So that was one of the many checks and balances, as far as I could tell. Progress report, I'd have to say. They, at least with me, I've had 3 or 4 sessions with the council, and they call me back, and they want to see if everything we've been working on, which I don't have full knowledge of, has gone all right, if it's taken. It's like taking to a medicine or something, not rejecting it. So whatever processes they're putting me through, has it taken? Is that okay? How was I doing? Although the conversation is pretty one-sided. So this time, I was in what seemed to be a theater. I'm thinking of the movie The Elephant Man. And I'm thinking of the theater where students would watch what was going on in the theater part, or the stage part, I guess. And I was on the stage part, not being operated on, but speaking to some humans and not humans. It seemed to me there were some humans that it's like military fatigues. I'm distressed to say that, but I think they were there. And then there were some aliens there too. I cannot tell you what they looked like. I never get a good look at them. Brown skinned is all I can say. And they were basically asking me, has this taken? Are you okay? And I have to say to you, if they were to ask me here in this room, I might say no. You know, I have all these questions for you, but I don't have my full set of faculties. When I'm taken or abducted in spirit form, I don't have my full set of faculties. So I acknowledged that I was okay. And they said, are you ready for the next step? I don't know what the next step is. So that me, in those conditions, just automatically says, oh yeah, let's go. Let's move forward. And I've always said yes.
Now, alien beings told you over a period of many years that they adjusted your psychic facilities and your physiology. How was your psychic facilities and physiology adjusted? And did they tell you the purpose, the reason for them making those changes? That's something that boggled my mind. I was fascinated with reading that they actually changed things within you. Why did they do it? Did they tell you why they did it? How did you react to it? What was that all about?
I'm still getting some of the answers to that, Stan. I'm looking back at my transcripts, but I'm still getting some of the answers to that. A part of their changing me was to facilitate, how do I put this, my being able to express them with more clarity. Part of it was to do with my being able to communicate with them clearly, because I am not very capable normally of doing this. In fact, the times under hypnosis when I communicated with this being called my twin and others, she has had to make adjustments. She's adjusted me. She's adjusted the atmosphere. And so how I experienced that from the standpoint of the hypnotherapist's chair, reclining in the chair, being deeply relaxed, was I experienced motion. I experienced heat. And also, Lesley experienced heat. The heat was not just me, it was in the room. It was intensely hot in the room. So I experienced heat, I experienced motion, I experienced, I have to say, elongation, which is something that Lesley didn't see physically, but she saw psychically, the elongation. The placement of an alien being over me or within me. So I've come to believe that part of this is for me to express them with more clarity, literally with them being inside me to a certain extent. Being able to express them from a very pure conscious source. And so she said she's had to adjust me and adjust my physiology many times because I'm not good at this. She specifically said, on almost, if you can picture an alien rant, you're not good at bilocation. It's like, really? Should I be? You know, this is not a natural talent I don't think I have, right? And so she's adjusted me, and there's even been a couple of procedures. I was reading about one yesterday, right? Needles stuck in my head. Needles stuck in my head. And it's like, am I imagining this? Well, they hurt. Not like I'm screaming, but they hurt, and I could feel the pressure, and I felt different after them. Needles being stuck in my eye, procedures being done on both my eyes, probably once or twice. So I'm thinking, okay, is it also to say I am becoming something that I was not? And if I go down that particular road or path, I'm saying that's partly true. I think it's partly true. I'm becoming more.
Wes, you felt you were controlled by the ETs and that they manipulated you. You had no control. That had to be frustrating. What did you do to maintain your sanity?
So I was on the edge for sure at certain times in my life. I had good friends. My ex was a good friend. And I can relate a short experience that will show that easily. I began to tell more people because I couldn't contain it.
Okay, yeah.
And
exploding, yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of leaking out. And I began to think I needed to turn it around. Like, was there any good reason I was considering this to be so negative? And in fact, I've only had a handful of negative encounters. So why was it so negative? Well, I was resistant, how would I put this, to being that vulnerable. And it's a lesson well learned at this point in my life. In fact, I've turned it around, and I help other people become vulnerable in a safe way.
In a safe way.
In a safe way,
yeah.
Not uncomfortably. Because vulnerable means full access. At least to the aliens it does. Better access. And it works both ways. My access to them comes from vulnerability as well. And my twin has even said this. You've got to be able to be more comfortable with this degree of access and vulnerability. Also, you've got to stop thinking, and I think I know what you meant by this, you've got to stop thinking about what you think you are. I think I'm this. This physical, in the flesh thing. I've never thought that's all I was. But I think I'm this, and then even though I think, oh yeah, but I'm psychic and I might be able to heal, and all these other things that have happened in my life, magical stuff, wonderful stuff, I still am seeing constraints, or at least constraints are in the way. Blockages are in the way. So I had to come to terms with, and I'm still not great at this, they're not blockages. That is my problem. And Lesley and I used to have a great guest on our show. A fellow who's deceased now, John Raffanello, worked at Disney. He was an engineer at Disney. John Raffanello had amazing contacts with extraterrestrials and other life forms and people in the afterlife. And he used to always say something to us on air. If you think you cannot do a thing, you cannot. It was very straightforward. If I think I have physical restraints to being in touch with my twin, I do. If I get rid of that thinking, I don't.
You met hybrid children born of your own sperm. What was it like meeting them? And do you have any recollection of when and how they were conceived? And what did they look like? Were they like human, alien, or you couldn't really tell? That whole episode in your life had to be something to see children hybrids that of you.
I know this will stretch some of your viewers' patience. I don't know how to put this. The taking of genetic material, as it's called in the field now, which is pretty funny. It's a polite way of saying that they're going to take your sperm or ova or something, is nothing new. And there are certain people out there that think it's a vast conspiracy. I do not buy into it. There's an author called David Jacobs, who writes quite alarming stuff. I'm not saying it's not all true, or some of it's not true. I don't subscribe to his beliefs. But there's zero doubt in my mind that there are hybrids among us. I'm not the world's expert on that, but I've been at seminars where there are people who have interviewed, I think it was 8 to 10 hybrids of different species, people that were capable of metamorphosis right before your eyes. I've not met this kind of person. But this particular author, she's getting up there in years, has interviewed several. I wish her name would come to mind, does not come to mind. But I can follow up with you and your viewers if you're interested. So I've never really thought of myself that way, although I give it a cursory glance every now and again, saying, maybe, possibly. But I've been taken to children several times. And it's either in the company of someone else, a woman in my life, say, in the past, or it's in the company of, in one case, a woman who was completely turned off, blank. She was there to react to the children. She did not react to the children. She was shut down. I was still quite aware. And in that case, there were two little blonde kids, 3 or 4 twins, male and female, that, just like a typical kid, they looked fairly typical to me, couldn't care less about me, and they ran away. So that was one of them. But I've also been taken to rooms where there have been obviously a hybrid children who were shaped something like humans, toddlers. Inevitably, their heads were much too large. In one case, as large as its body, so it could not properly crawl or move. And the thought I got, because these creatures never speak to me, it's all telepathic. The thought I got was, this is one of my kids, and this has happened more than once. This is one of my children. I'm supposed to be in the presence of them for some unknown reason. The most that's ever happened is I picked one up. But that's it. That's it. So how does it happen? This is something I rarely speak about because it's totally unpleasant. It's totally unpleasant. I'll talk about it a little bit because I need to learn how.
Sure, and again, if you don't feel right about it, listen to yourself. I'm on your side, but that maybe at a later date we'll do that.
Okay, let's just say it's not pleasant. It's not like having a great
cliffhanger, so I can have you back again.
Okay.
Now, I have to tell you, Wes, considering the hell, and it seems like a hell you went through for so many years, it's a miracle you're here to tell your story. And for myself and the Paranormal Yacker audience, I want to thank you for sharing it. Of course, I know initially that it was not easy for you to do that.
No.
On that. Now, I'm sure many people in the Paranormal Yacker audience would want to read your book. I know I read it, and I read it, and I reread it, and I says, wow. And it's all, this came from you. This was from you. If somebody wants to order it, how do they do it?
So thank you for asking that. Folks can go to Amazon.ca or Amazon.com and look it up by its title, Intersection, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Or they can go to the publisher's site, PrometheaPress.com.
Okay, that's great. So Wes, I want to thank you for being a wonderful guest, fascinating. And now we have a cliffhanger, and definitely for your next book and other things down the road with that. Thank you so much for being on the Paranormal Yacker.
Thank you, Stan. Much appreciated.